Lightning split the sky, and rain turned dust into mud as smoke filled the air around a destroyed Apache camp. Nantan Loma ran, her bare feet slipping through the wet ground, her dress torn, her heart pounding. Gunshots echoed. Men in hats searched the wreckage, laughing and shouting. She hid behind a tree, gripping a knife, an unfamiliar one. More screams. A child's cry went silent. A shadow moved above. A man stood on the ridge, rifle in hand, watching her. He didn't shoot. Instead, he nodded once and disappeared. Why didn't he kill her? And who was he? Before we jump back and tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The storm had passed by morning. The sky was pale and silent, still heavy with smoke. Crows circled over the burned camp, their cries sharp and cold. Nantan Loma crouched near the river's edge, her hands in the icy water. Dried blood flaked from her skin. She scrubbed harder, as if she could erase the night. But the stains stayed. Not just on her hands, on everything. Her body ached, her feet torn from running barefoot over stone. Her stomach growled, but she ignored it. Hunger wasn't new. Across the water, a deer stepped between the trees. It stared at her for a long moment, then vanished into the brush. She wished she could follow it. Instead, she stood and looked back toward the smoke still rising in the distance. Her home was gone, her people gone. The world she knew had been burned to the ground. But she was still here, and so was he. She hadn't seen him since the storm. The man on the ridge. The one who didn't shoot. The one who watched, then vanished. A ghost in the rain. She didn't know his name, or why he had let her go. But she remembered his eyes, the way he hadn't looked at her like she was an enemy. In these lands, that made him different. She turned and began walking. Miles away, Cole McAllister dug his shovel into the hard, rocky ground. The grave he worked on was narrow and shallow, meant for something small. He laid the body of a young calf inside, its legs stiff, its eyes long since clouded over. Coyotes had gotten it in the night. Nothing to be done. He wiped sweat from his brow and stared across the dry land. Red mesas rose in the distance. The wind carried dust and the faint sound of his windmill creaking. His ranch sat quiet behind him. A single house, a barn with one door hanging off its hinges, and a few horses milling in a corral. Not much, but it was his. Cole was used to silence. Too used to it, maybe. No wife. No children. No friends close by. Just cattle and sky, and the occasional buzzard. But something had shifted in him since last night. Something he didn't have words for. He had seen her. The girl. Apache, maybe 17 or 18. Alone. Covered in blood and ash. He could have raised his rifle. Others would have. But something about her made him freeze. The look in her eyes, it wasn't just fear. It was fury. Like she carried a storm inside her. He hadn't slept. He'd spent the whole night sitting on his porch, rifle across his lap, watching the trees. Not sure if he was hoping she'd return, or afraid she would. Nantan's legs shook by the time she reached the edge of the ranch. She didn't know why she came here. She told herself it was to steal food or water. But deep down, she knew better. She had no plan, only instinct. From behind a tree, she watched the man hammering a board back onto his barn. He moved slowly, like someone used to doing everything alone. He didn't wear a gun on his hip. It was on the porch rail, within reach, but not on him. That said something. She stepped out of the trees. The horse closest to the fence snorted and turned its head. The man didn't look up right away. When he did, he didn't move, didn't speak. Just stared. Nantan stared back. No one moved for a long moment. Then he nodded. Again, just once. Like he had last night. She walked slowly toward the fence, but not all the way. Her hand hovered near the knife at her belt. "You hungry?" the man asked. His voice was low and even. Not friendly, but not cold either. She didn't answer. He pointed toward the house. "I've got beans. Not much else." Still, she said nothing. She didn't trust words. But she followed him anyway. Inside the small house, the smell of coffee filled the air. It was strong and bitter, but warm. She sat at the edge of the table, barely touching the tin cup he offered her. He didn't ask questions. He just filled 2 bowls and sat across from her. She ate slow, watched him over the rim of her cup. "Name's Cole," he said finally. "Cole McAllister." She didn't answer. "You got a name?" Still silence. He didn't press her. He just nodded, like he already knew she wouldn't say. "I won't turn you in," he said. "Not my business what happened out there." At that, her eyes narrowed. Her shoulders tensed. He saw it. "I was up in the hills. Saw the fire. Heard the shooting. Knew what it was. They killed them all," she said quietly. Her first words. He didn't look away. "I figured." She swallowed hard. Her hands tightened around the spoon. "They came with torches. Men on horses. Not soldiers. Not tribal. Just killers." Cole nodded slowly. "Seen their kind before. Paid to clear land. Leave no trace." "They left me," she whispered. "I was the only one." "No," he said. "They missed you." She looked at him for a long moment, unsure what he meant. "You weren't supposed to live," he added. "But you did." Later, she stood by the corral, watching the horses. The wind pulled her hair back from her face. The sky was turning red with sunset. Cole joined her, chewing on a stem of grass. "They'll come looking," he said. "They always do. Can't leave a job unfinished." She nodded. "I'll help you," he said. "But you've got to help me too." She turned to him, cautious. "Why?" He shrugged. "Because they're not done. And you're not the only one with something to lose." A hawk cried overhead, circling in the orange sky. "I'm Nantan Loma," she said finally. "Daughter of Atsa. Last of my people." Cole gave a small nod. "Then you stay here tonight, Nantan," he said. "Tomorrow, we figure out how to fight back." And for the first time in days, she didn't feel alone. The next morning came dry and still. No smoke on the horizon. No signs of riders. Just a hot wind and a silence that felt too heavy. Cole saddled his horse with a calm that didn't reach his eyes. He moved like he always did. Steady, focused, but Nantan noticed the way he glanced toward the hills every few minutes. Something was off. Even the horses were restless, ears twitching toward sounds that weren't there. "You got a rifle?" he asked her. She nodded. "It's not mine. I took it off a dead man." He gave a short grunt, not approval or judgment, just acknowledgement. "Keep it close," he said. "I'm riding into town. Need to pick up feed, check the post. Won't be long." Nantan narrowed her eyes. "They'll see you." "I'm counting on it," he said, pulling himself into the saddle. "Let him see me alone." She didn't like it. "You think they're already looking?" "They always are," he said. "But this time we look back." He turned his horse and rode off without another word. Nantan didn't stay idle. She walked the ranch's edges, learned the fences, the weak boards, the blind spots. She found a spot on the north ridge where she could see the whole property. House, barn, corral, the trail that curved from the valley. She sat there with the rifle across her knees, eyes scanning the horizon. When Cole returned in the afternoon, his horse was breathing hard. He was calm, but not easy. "They followed me," he said, dismounting. "4 of them. Stayed just far enough back to not be noticed by folks in town." "Who are they?" she asked. "White hats. Red scarves. That mark mean anything to you?" Her face darkened. "The ones who burned the camp wore red around their necks. Said it was to show who paid them." Cole cursed under his breath. "Bastards are getting bold. Used to hide. Now they ride out in the open." "What do they want?" she asked. He met her eyes. "Whatever land they ride through." She looked out at the ranch, quiet again, almost peaceful. "They'll come here next," she said. "No," Cole said. "They're already here." Night fell fast. Cole pulled a shotgun from under the floorboards. Nantan watched him from the doorway. His face was stone, but his hands were sure. This wasn't new to him. "I didn't come here to fight someone else's war," she said. He didn't look up. "Ain't just mine anymore." Outside, the wind picked up, blowing dust against the windows. Then, a whistle. It came from the darkness. High and slow. Nantan froze. Cole stood straight, listening. Another whistle, this time from the other side of the house. Then came the horses. Not galloping, just walking. Slow. Measured. For men. Shadows in the dark, spread out wide. Red scarves tied around their necks. Guns hanging low. Cole stepped onto the porch, the shotgun in one hand. The lead rider called out. "Evenin', rancher." "Evenin'," Cole answered. "We heard you got company." Cole didn't answer. We're looking for an Apache girl, the man went on. Dangerous one. Took a man's eye out with a blade. Escaped a legal roundup. Thought maybe you'd seen her. I haven't, Cole lied. Another rider chuckled. That's funny. One of the boys swore he saw someone with long black hair watching you ride back into town. Cole's jaw tensed. Hair don't make a person. The leader dismounted. Boots hit the ground hard. Tell you what. Why don't we come inside and look around? Cole raised the shotgun just slightly. Ain't no law says you can. There ain't no law out here, friend. Behind him, Nantan crouched low behind the door. Rifle ready. She could hear her own heartbeat. The man took a step forward. You think she's worth dying for? Cole didn't flinch. No, but I think you might be worth killing. Silence. Then a voice from the dark called out. He's bluffing. Shoot him. A shot cracked. Not from Cole. From the ridge. The rider furthest out dropped from his saddle with a scream. Bullet to the chest. Nantan fired again. Chaos broke out. The horses reared. The red-scarved men dove for cover, shooting blind into the trees. Cole blasted the leader backward off his feet. A second man ran for the gate. Nantan caught him in the thigh. He fell, cursing. In seconds, the ranch was a battlefield. Then it was quiet again. Only two men crawled away into the darkness. One limped, dragging the other. Cole lowered his shotgun, breathing hard. Nantan stepped out from the shadows, face calm, rifle still warm. He looked at her and nodded. You shoot better than most men I know. I had good reasons to learn. They buried the dead behind the barn. No words were said. As dawn broke over the hills, Cole stood at the porch railing, looking out at the damage. Blood in the dirt, fence half broken, a horse missing. This wasn't a warning, he said. This was a message. They'll come back, Nantan said. He nodded. With more men. More fire. She tightened her hands on the rail. Then we burn first. He looked at her, surprised. Her voice was steady. We take the fight to them. Cole cracked a dry smile. You're not what I expected. She looked toward the hills. Neither are you. In one night, the quiet ranch was gone. So was the illusion of safety. Now, there was only war. The next few days passed in silence. But it was a different kind of silence. Not peaceful. Not still. It was the kind of silence before a storm breaks. The kind where even the birds don't sing. Nantan worked without being asked. She mended the broken fence, cleaned the blood from the porch, and helped dig new trenches around the barn. She didn't say much, but Cole noticed the way she moved. Always watching the tree line. Always listening for hooves or whistles. She was young, but she wasn't a child. Whatever softness she'd once had was burned away with the camp. Meanwhile, Cole rode out to the neighboring ranches. He stopped first at the Harper Spread, a big, fenced-in piece of land where cattle grazed under the eye of a hard old man named Jedediah Harper. Jed stood on his porch when Cole rode up, chewing on a toothpick, eyes squinting against the sun. Heard you had visitors, Jed said before Cole even got off his horse. Word travels fast, Cole replied. Not as fast as trouble, Jed said. You sure you want to be standing on that side of the fence, Cole? Cole didn't answer. Jed sighed and spit into the dirt. I don't like those Redscraft boys neither. But they got backers now. Big money. Some say they're working under a land title signed in Santa Fe. Makes M official. Cole frowned. Official don't make M right. Jed shook his head. No, but it makes him dangerous. I need help, Cole said plainly. They'll be back. With more men. If they take me out, they'll come for you next. Jed looked toward the hills. I built this place with my own hands. Ain't letting anyone burn it. Then ride with me. I'll think on it, Jed muttered. But I ain't risking my sons unless I got more than a gut feeling and a scared girl on your porch. Cole nodded once. He didn't argue. Back at the ranch, Nantan wasn't alone. A young boy, maybe 12, stood by the fence, holding a slingshot and watching the horses. He was dusty, thin, and grinning like he had nowhere better to be. Who are you? Nantan asked, stepping closer, hand on her knife. The boy didn't flinch. Name's Eli. I live over that ridge. Been watching y'all since the gunfight. You spying? Just looking, he said proudly. You shot one of 'em clean in the chest. I saw it. Nantan narrowed her eyes. What do you want? I can help, he said. I know the canyons better than anyone. I know where they sleep, Where they piss, where they stash their guns. Why would you help us? Eli shrugged. My pa was Apache. He got strung up in town for stealing a loaf of bread. Mama says keep my head down, but I ain't like that. Nanton studied him. He had fire in his eyes, small but bright. You're just a boy. I'm a boy with eyes and ears, he said. And I don't scare easy. She hesitated, then nodded. Fine, but you stay out of the shooting. I'll do more good than harm, he grinned. You'll see. That night, Cole returned with a visitor. Lena Ortega, a Mexican healer who lived between towns, stepped off the back of his horse with a bag of herbs and a flintlock tucked in her belt. She was tall, in her 40s, with long black skirts and eyes that seemed to see straight through skin. She eyed Nantan with interest. You're the one they hunt. Nantan nodded cautiously. You have spirit, Lena said. But that alone doesn't keep bullets away. She needs medicine, Cole said. She's been running too long without rest. I can give her tea, Lena replied, already moving into the house. But she also needs sleep. Dreams carry weight, especially for ones who see more than they should. How do you know I see anything? Nantan asked. Lena smiled, not unkindly. You walk like a girl haunted. By morning, the house was no longer empty. Eli had moved in without asking. He'd built a lean-to near the barn and filled it with stolen supplies. He whittled arrows, cleaned tack, and talked nonstop. Somehow, Cole didn't send him away. Lena stayed too. She slept on a cot by the fire and watched Nantan carefully, as though measuring her worth. They're forming a circle around you, Lena said one night. Old powers, old enemies. You'll need more than bullets soon. I don't believe in spirits, Nantan said. Lena only smiled. That doesn't stop them. Later that week, Jed Harper arrived with both sons, Jeb and Clay, riding hard and carrying 2 crates of ammunition. The next morning came dry and still. No smoke on the horizon. No signs of riders. Just a hot wind and a silence that felt too heavy. Cole saddled his horse with a calm that didn't reach his eyes. He moved like he always did. Steady, focused, but Nantan noticed the way he glanced toward the hills every few minutes. Something was off. Even the horses were restless, ears twitching toward sounds that weren't there. You got a rifle? He asked her. She nodded. It's not mine. I took it off a dead man. He gave a short grunt, not approval or judgment, just acknowledgement. Keep it close, he said. I'm riding into town. Need to pick up feed, check the post. Won't be long. Nantan narrowed her eyes. They'll see you. I'm counting on it, he said, pulling himself into the saddle. Let him see me alone. She didn't like it. You think they're already looking? They always are, he said. But this time we look back. He turned his horse and rode off without another word. Nantan didn't stay idle. She walked the ranch's edges, learned the fences, the weak boards, the blind spots. She found a spot on the north ridge where she could see the whole property. House, barn, corral, the trail that curved from the valley. She sat there with the rifle across her knees, eyes scanning the horizon. When Cole returned in the afternoon, his horse was breathing hard. He was calm, but not easy. They followed me, he said, dismounting. 4 of them. Stayed just far enough back to not be noticed by folks in town. Who are they? She asked. White hats. Red scarves. That mark mean anything to you? Her face darkened. The ones who burned the camp wore red around their necks. Said it was to show who paid them. Cole cursed under his breath. Bastards are getting bold. Used to hide. Now they ride out in the open. What do they want? She asked. He met her eyes. Whatever land they ride through. She looked out at the ranch, quiet again, almost peaceful. They'll come here next, she said. No, Cole said. They're already here. Night fell fast. Cole pulled a shotgun from under the floorboards. Nantan watched him from the doorway. His face was stone, but his hands were sure. This wasn't new to him. I didn't come here to fight someone else's war, she said. He didn't look up. Ain't just mine anymore. Outside, the wind picked up, blowing dust against the windows. Then, a whistle. It came from the darkness. High and slow. Nantan froze. Cole stood straight, listening. Another whistle, this time from the other side of the house. Then came the horses. Not galloping, just walking. Slow. Measured. For men. Shadows in the dark, spread out wide. Red scarves tied around their necks. guns hanging low. Cole stepped onto the porch, the shotgun in one hand. The lead rider called out, "Evenin', rancher." "Evenin'," Cole answered. "We heard you got company." Cole didn't answer. "We're looking for an Apache girl," the man went on. "Dangerous one. Took a man's eye out with a blade. Escaped a legal roundup. Thought maybe you'd seen her." "I haven't," Cole lied. Another rider chuckled. "That's funny. One of the boys swore he saw someone with long black hair watching you ride back into town." Cole's jaw tensed. "Hair don't make a person." The leader dismounted. Boots hit the ground hard. "Tell you what, why don't we come inside and look around?" Cole raised the shotgun just slightly. "Ain't no law says you can." "There ain't no law out here, friend." Behind him, Nantan crouched low behind the door. Rifle ready. She could hear her own heartbeat. The man took a step forward. "You think she's worth dying for?" Cole didn't flinch. "No, but I think you might be worth killing." Silence. Then a voice from the dark called out, "He's bluffing. Shoot him." A shot cracked. Not from Cole. From the ridge. The rider furthest out dropped from his saddle with a scream. Bullet to the chest. Nantan fired again. Chaos broke out. The horses reared. The red-scarved men dove for cover, shooting blind into the trees. Cole blasted the leader backward off his feet. A second man ran for the gate. Nantan caught him in the thigh. He fell, cursing. In seconds, the ranch was a battlefield. Then it was quiet again. Only two men crawled away into the darkness. One limped, dragging the other. Cole lowered his shotgun, breathing hard. Nantan stepped out from the shadows, face calm, rifle still warm. He looked at her and nodded. "You shoot better than most men I know." "I had good reasons to learn." They buried the dead behind the barn. No words were said. As dawn broke over the hills, Cole stood at the porch railing, looking out at the damage. Blood in the dirt, fence half broken, a horse missing. "This wasn't a warning," he said. "This was a message." "They'll come back," Nantan said. He nodded. "With more men. More fire." She tightened her hands on the rail. "Then we burn first." He looked at her, surprised. Her voice was steady. "We take the fight to them." Cole cracked a dry smile. "You're not what I expected." She looked toward the hills. "Neither are you." In one night, the quiet ranch was gone. So was the illusion of safety. Now, there was only war. The next few days passed in silence. But it was a different kind of silence. Not peaceful. Not still. It was the kind of silence before a storm breaks. The kind where even the birds don't sing. Nantan worked without being asked. She mended the broken fence, cleaned the blood from the porch, and helped dig new trenches around the barn. She didn't say much, but Cole noticed the way she moved. Always watching the tree line. Always listening for hooves or whistles. She was young, but she wasn't a child. Whatever softness she'd once had was burned away with the camp. Meanwhile, Cole rode out to the neighboring ranches. He stopped first at the Harper Spread, a big, fenced-in piece of land where cattle grazed under the eye of a hard old man named Jedediah Harper. Jed stood on his porch when Cole rode up, chewing on a toothpick, eyes squinting against the sun. "Heard you had visitors," Jed said before Cole even got off his horse. "Word travels fast," Cole replied. "Not as fast as trouble," Jed said. "You sure you want to be standing on that side of the fence, Cole?" Cole didn't answer. Jed sighed and spit into the dirt. "I don't like those Red Scraft boys neither. But they got backers now. Big money. Some say they're working under a land title signed in Santa Fe. Makes M official." Cole frowned. "Official don't make M right." Jed shook his head. "No, but it makes him dangerous." "I need help," Cole said plainly. "They'll be back. With more men. If they take me out, they'll come for you next." Jed looked toward the hills. "I built this place with my own hands. Ain't letting anyone burn it." "Then ride with me." "I'll think on it," Jed muttered. "But I ain't risking my sons unless I got more than a gut feeling and a scared girl on your porch." Cole nodded once. He didn't argue. Back at the ranch, Nantan wasn't alone. A young boy, maybe 12, stood by the fence, holding a slingshot and watching the horses. He was dusty, thin, and grinning like he had nowhere better to be. "Who are you?" Nantan asked, stepping closer, hand on her knife. The boy didn't flinch. "Name's Eli. I live over that ridge. Been watching y'all since the gunfight." "You spying?" Just lookin', he said proudly. You shot one of 'em clean in the chest. I saw it. Nantan narrowed her eyes. What do you want? I can help, he said. I know the canyons better than anyone. I know where they sleep, where they piss, where they stash their guns. Why would you help us? Eli shrugged. My pa was Apache. He got strung up in town for stealing a loaf of bread. Mama says keep my head down, but I ain't like that. Nantan studied him. He had fire in his eyes, small but bright. You're just a boy. I'm a boy with eyes and ears, he said. And I don't scare easy. She hesitated, then nodded. Fine, but you stay out of the shooting. I'll do more good than harm, he grinned. You'll see. That night, Cole returned with a visitor. Lena Ortega, a Mexican healer who lived between towns, stepped off the back of his horse with a bag of herbs and a flintlock tucked in her belt. She was tall, in her 40s, with long black skirts and eyes that seemed to see straight through skin. She eyed Nantan with interest. You're the one they hunt. Nantan nodded cautiously. You have spirit, Lena said. But that alone doesn't keep bullets away. She needs medicine, Cole said. She's been running too long without rest. I can give her tea, Lena replied, already moving into the house. But she also needs sleep. Dreams carry weight, especially for ones who see more than they should. How do you know I see anything? Nantan asked. Lena smiled, not unkindly. You walk like a girl haunted. By morning, the house was no longer empty. Eli had moved in without asking. He built a lean-to near the barn and filled it with stolen supplies. He whittled arrows, cleaned tack, and talked nonstop. Somehow, Cole didn't send him away. Lena stayed too. She slept on a cot by the fire and watched Nantan carefully, as though measuring her worth. They're forming a circle around you, Lena said one night. Old powers, old enemies. You'll need more than bullets soon. I don't believe in spirits, Nantan said. Lena only smiled. That doesn't stop them. Later that week, Jed Harper arrived with both sons, Jeb and Clay, riding hard and carrying 2 crates of ammunition. Reckon you were right, Jed said to Cole. 3 ranches down south got burned. No survivors. They're coming up the valley. The Harper boys looked at Nantan with wary eyes, but they didn't speak against her. She didn't return the stare. She was used to that look. I've been drawing up plans, Cole said. We build walls here. Trap their path through the canyon. Force them into a crossfire. I'll bring more men tomorrow, Jed said. But this land won't save itself. Cole nodded. Nantan stepped forward. Then let's stop waiting. That night, around the fire, they talked strategy. Lena crushed herbs while Eli sketched a crude map in the dirt. Nantan pointed out high ground. Cole marked where to place rifles. Jed and his boys listened, slowly realizing that this wasn't just Cole's fight anymore. It was all of theirs. Each had lost something to the red scarves. A family, a home, a way of life. Now, the ranch wasn't just a ranch. It was the last place left to make a stand. Far beyond the hills, in a canyon lit by campfire, the red-scarved riders gathered. Their leader, a man named Briggs, rode up with a fresh telegram in hand. He waved it at the others. U.S. cavalry ain't coming. Army don't care. This land's ours for the taking. A man leaned in. What about the rancher? Briggs spat. He's just a man. Another asked. And the Apache girl? Briggs grinned. She's just a ghost with a price on her head. He looked toward the stars. Tomorrow we ride. Back at the ranch, Nantan sat alone on the porch, her rifle leaning against the wall. Cole came out and stood beside her, sipping from a tin cup. You think we have a chance? She asked. He was quiet for a moment. Then no. She looked at him. But I'd rather die fighting beside you than live watching another fire. Nantan said nothing, but her grip on the rifle tightened. The trap was set. For days, Cole and the others worked like men and women with no tomorrow. They dug trenches, set up barricades with wagon wheels and broken timber, lined the canyon trail with sharpened stakes, and buried gunpowder kegs under false brush. Every move had been planned, every angle considered. At dawn, smoke rose from the valley. A scout, one of Jed's boys, rode in hard and breathless. They're coming. 40, maybe more. Armed to the teeth. Cole looked toward the canyon mouth. Then it's time. Nantan took the ridge. She lay belly down on the hard dirt, eyes locked on the trail below. Eli was beside her with a spyglass and a slingshot. He wanted a rifle, but Cole had said no. Not yet, kid. Lena waited near the barn, a pistol in her skirt and vials of fire oil tucked under her belt. She'd already drawn sigils in the dirt, whispering words no one understood. Just in case, she said. The Harpers crouched behind the barricade near the corral. Cole paced the front line alone, checking and rechecking the fuse wire. This was it. No more waiting. They heard the riders before they saw them. Thunder, boots, hooves, dust clouds. The ground shook. The canyon mouth filled with bodies, red-scarved riders, long rifles, bandoliers. They didn't charge. Not yet. They moved slow, confident, like men who already believed they'd won. At the front road, Briggs. He wasn't smiling anymore. He held up a hand. The riders stopped. You there, he shouted to the wind. Cole Madsen. We're here for the girl. Cole stepped up from behind the wall. You'll have to come take her. Briggs laughed, but there was no joy in it. You think you're safe in that pile of wood and dirt? I got enough men to wipe this place off the map. Try, Cole said. Briggs narrowed his eyes. You sure about that? Then he raised his arm. The riders began to move. Nanan held her breath. Waited. The front wave of horsemen hit the first trap, spike pits hidden beneath loose soil. Screams rose as horses went down, riders thrown. The second line scattered, but more traps followed. Tripwires, buried nails, snare ropes. Gunfire cracked from the ridge. Nantan picked off the lead rider. Then she fired again. And again. Smoke filled the canyon as Cole lit the fuse. A split second later, the buried powder blew. A wall of fire and dust blasted through the first row of red scarves. Bodies flew. The barricades held. The enemy was scattered. It worked. For a moment, they thought it worked. Then came the second wave. Briggs wasn't just leading thugs this time. These were trained men, mercenaries, former soldiers, men who moved like wolves. They came from the east flank, hidden behind the hills. It was a flanking ambush. They struck fast. The Harper line broke first. Clay was shot through the neck. Jeb took a wound to the leg. Jed fought back like a devil, but the surprise overwhelmed them. One rider threw fire oil on the barn. Flames roared up, smoke blackening the sky. Cole turned, eyes wide. No. He ran toward the barn as bullets sprayed the dirt around him. Lena screamed from behind the smoke, dragging a wounded horse to safety. One of the mercenaries came up behind her. Eli shot him clean through the hand with a slingshot stone. Enough of a pause for Cole to put a bullet in the man's chest. But the damage was done. Their plan had failed. Nantan abandoned the ridge. She slid down the slope, rifle in hand, and headed toward the fire. The barn was almost gone, but inside, two red-scarved riders were dragging out the crates of ammunition they hadn't found earlier. She fired once. One went down. The other spun with a pistol, but she tackled him before he could aim. They hit the dirt hard, rolled in the dust, fists in fury. He slammed her head against the ground. She kicked him in the throat. He coughed, staggered. She grabbed her blade and drove it into his chest. Then she stood, panting, blood on her hands. Smoke behind her. Screams ahead. Chaos everywhere. Cole dragged Jed behind cover. We're losing ground, Jed growled, clutching his chest. They knew our setup, Cole muttered. They knew the traps. Someone told them. Jed spit blood. You think you got a traitor? Before Cole could answer, a horn blew from the eastern ridge. A signal. The third wave came, this time from the riverbed. Cole's stomach dropped. They weren't just being flanked. They were being surrounded. Lena ran to Nantan, pulling her back from the fire. You must go. We can still fight, Nantan said. No, Lena hissed. This fight is lost. This place, this land, is not the war. You are. Nantan shook her head. I won't leave them. You must, Lena said. The enemy doesn't want Cole. They want you. They want to erase your story. Behind them, another explosion. The ammunition crate caught fire. The barn roof collapsed in flame. Cole stumbled through the smoke, bleeding from the arm. Go, he rasped. Run. Get to the pass. Nannan looked between them. You'll die? We're already dead if they catch you, Cole said. Then I die with you. Cole grabbed her arm. No. This is bigger than us. If you get through, maybe others fight. Maybe it don't end here. His grip was strong, his eyes pleading. Nantan blinked away smoke and tears. Then she turned and ran. She and Eli slipped through the side ravine. Shots echoed behind them. Briggs's men chased, 3 riders. Eli led her down the goat trail, ducking brush and stone. "There's a cave up ahead," he shouted. She didn't answer, just ran faster. Behind them, gunfire rang out. Bullets zipped past her head. Eli tripped. She yanked him to his feet. They reached the cave just as night fell, just in time to disappear into the dark. Back at the ranch, Cole stood on the burning porch. Briggs approached, pistol in hand. "You should have handed her over," he said. Cole, covered in blood and ash, smiled. "Should have tried harder." Then, from the flames, a final explosion. The last powder keg, buried beneath the porch. The ranch went up in fire. Briggs was thrown backward. Smoke swallowed everything. In the cave, Nantan sat in silence, clutching the rifle. Eli lay beside her, breathing hard, face pale. She didn't cry. She didn't shake. She just stared into the dark. Alone. Everything she'd known, everyone gone. The ranch was lost. The fight was not. The world didn't end that night. It just changed. When the smoke settled and the echoes of gunfire faded, the land felt different. Hollow, scorched, too quiet. The ranch was gone. The men and women who'd stood against Briggs' riders were scattered or dead. And Nantan? She was no longer just hunted. She was alone. Again. They stayed hidden in the cave for 2 days. Eli barely spoke, save for asking once if Cole might still be alive. Nantan didn't answer. On the 3rd day, she stood and said, "We move." But where? Someplace they won't look. Where's that? I don't know. They traveled by night, following the rivers and animal trails, sleeping under brush and listening for hoofbeats. Nantan taught Eli how to move quiet, how to listen to the wind. In return, he made her laugh. Once, by carving a slingshot from a twisted branch and naming it Death Whistle. It was the first time she smiled in days. It faded quickly, but it was there. Their bond, once built on survival, began to shift. She wasn't just protecting him now. She needed him too. His questions kept her sharp. His hope reminded her not everything was lost. One night, they camped near a dry creek. Eli poked the fire with a stick. "You miss him?" "Cole," she asked. He nodded. She stared into the flames. "He saved me. Not because he had to. Because he believed in something better." Eli chewed his lip. "You think he's dead?" "I don't know." She didn't want to know. Hope hurt worse than grief. A week later, they reached the edge of a mining town called Las Piedras. Dusty streets, tired faces, tin signs rattling in the wind. Nantan pulled her hood low, covered her face with a scarf. Her rifle stayed slung low. They were both too thin, too quiet to draw much attention, but she felt eyes on her every step. Eli led them to the back door of a small cantina run by a widow named Marta. Marta recognized him instantly. "Your mother's worried sick," she said, hugging him hard. "Where have you been, Mikoso?" "Running," he said. Marta's eyes slid to Nantan. She saw the dirt, the wounds, the knife at her hip, and she saw the truth. Marta didn't ask questions. She fed them both, let them wash, gave them a room in the attic. "You stay 2 nights," she said softly. "No more. They're watching the roads. Asking for an Apache girl. Big reward." Nantan only nodded. The next day, they found a flyer nailed to the saloon wall. "Wanted, dead or alive. Apache female, age 18 to 25. Armed. Dangerous. Reward, $500. The sketch looked too much like her. Eli stared at it. "They made you look mean." She tore it down. That night, she sat awake long after he slept, staring out the attic window, watching the wind drag dust across the rooftops. She'd always known she wasn't safe, but now the world knew her name. The bounty wasn't just about revenge. It was about erasing her. She wasn't just a survivor anymore. She was a symbol. On the 3rd day, they slipped out of town before dawn. North, toward the mountains. No map, no trail, just instinct. Nantan barely slept. Her dreams were filled with smoke and screams. Sometimes she saw Cole standing in fire, silent. Other times she saw her mother, face painted with ash, whispering in a language she hadn't heard in years. She felt torn between who she had been and who the world now demanded her to be. But slowly, she began to change. They passed through a pine forest 2 days later. Snow still clung to the roots. There, they met a man named Thomas Greyhorn, half Lakota, half Irish. who ran a logging camp in the high woods. He saw Nanton's rifle before he saw her face. "You know how to use that?" he asked. "I do. You looking for work or trouble?" "Work," she lied. He didn't believe her, but he let them stay. Nanton helped with the lumber haul, chopped wood, patched cabins, listened to the other men whisper when they thought she couldn't hear. "That's her, ain't it? The Apache girl from the bounty sheet. She don't look like much. Doesn't need to. She's still standing." Eli found a place among the cook's staff. He joked, told stories, lightened the cold silence of the camp. For the first time since the ranch, they had a roof over their heads. Nanton could breathe. She still didn't feel safe, but she felt alive. One night, Greyhorn called her to his cabin. He poured tea, sat across from her, and said, "I lost my wife to the soldiers. Lakota village, burned in winter. They called it a mistake." Nanton said nothing. "I know what it's like," he went on, "to want the world to burn for what it took. But I also know fire don't build nothing back." "I'm not looking to build," she said. "Then what are you looking for?" She paused. "Something that matters. Something worth the fire." Greyhorn studied her. "You found it yet?" "I don't know." Spring came fast in the mountains. With it came new sounds, birds returning, rivers rising, rumors spreading. A trapper came through the camp one morning. He spoke of a man down south, tall, scarred, walking with a limp, asking after a girl with fierce eyes and a rifle scar across her hand. Nanton's heart stopped. Did he give a name? No, just said he owed her his life. She knew. Cole was alive. That night, she stood on the ridge overlooking the valley, snow melting beneath her boots, rifle slung across her back. Eli climbed up beside her. "You thinking of leaving?" he asked. "I have to," she said. He nodded. "Then I'm coming with you." She smiled. "You're just a kid." "Not anymore," he said. "Not after all this." She looked at him, really looked at him. He was still small, still grinning, but there was steel behind it now. He'd seen death, run through fire, stayed when it mattered. She nodded. "You're right." They left at dawn. Greyhorn gave her a horse, a map, and a blessing. "Whatever road you take," he said, "make sure it leads to something more than revenge." She rode with Eli beside her, not toward safety, but toward purpose. Down in the lowlands, the world stirred. Word of a girl who had survived the red-scarved riders, who'd killed 5 men with 1 rifle, who rode like the wind and never missed her mark. The legend was growing, and legends, once born, have power. In the next town, a preacher handed her a Bible and said, "God must have plans for you." She left it behind. In the next, a blacksmith asked if she'd fight for his land, too. She said, "Maybe." The world was watching her now, not because she was hunted, but because she'd become impossible to kill. Nanton didn't feel like a ghost anymore. She felt like a storm gathering at the edge of the horizon. And somewhere out there, Cole Madsen was walking the same path, leaving a trail of broken men behind him. The fire hadn't taken them. It had lit something. Something bigger. Something just beginning. They reached a border town called Dry Bluff under a swollen gray sky. Dust clung to every rooftop, and wind rattled the tin signs until it sounded like bones shaking. The kind of place where no one asked questions unless they were paid to. Nanton didn't like it. Too quiet. Too still. She and Eli rode in just before dusk. She paid for a stable slot with coin taken from a bounty hunter 2 towns back. No one looked twice at them. Just another drifter and her boy. They took a room above the saloon. Then everything fell apart. The first sign came that night. Eli woke her with a whisper. "Someone's downstairs, asking about an Apache woman." She grabbed her rifle, crept to the window. Below, 3 men in worn dusters leaned against the bar, flashing a bounty slip and a gold badge. Not regular bounty men. Federal marshals. Her chest tightened. They didn't stay long. One shook his head, crumpled the flyer, and left. But the bartender was watching. When Nanton came down the next morning, he nodded once. "Someone's waiting for you," he said. "Room in the back." She nearly walked out, nearly grabbed Eli and vanished again. But something in the man's tone, soft, strange, unsure, made her pause. She pushed open the door and came face to face with Cole Madsen. He looked thinner, older, burned and healed in all the wrong ways. His left arm hung stiff. His right eye was ringed in scar tissue. But he was alive. "Hello, Nantan," he said softly. She didn't speak. He didn't move. "I didn't know if you'd made it," he said. "After the fire. After everything." Her voice, when it came, was raw. "You told me to run. I hoped you would." Eli stepped in behind her, wide-eyed. "Cole." He smiled. "Hey, kid." Nantan stood there, unsure whether to cry or hit him. Then he said, "We need to talk." They sat around a small table. Cole's hand shook as he poured water into 3 cups. "I've been tracking them," he said. "Briggs' men, the marshals, the bounty network. It's bigger than I thought." "I figured that," Nantan said. "They've got government hands on it." He nodded. "Not just government. Rail companies, land brokers, even a few churches." She blinked. "Churches. Land means money," Cole said. "And you're standing in the way of their story." She frowned. "What story?" Cole looked her dead in the eye. "The one where you're the villain." He pulled a folded sheet from his coat, set it on the table. It was an official army report, stamped and signed. Nantan read the first line aloud. "Incident Report, Harper Ranch Rebellion, April 3rd, 1873. Her hands began to shake. Subject: unlawful attack by Apache insurgent. Estimated civilian casualties, 14. She stared at him. "This says I started it." "They rewrote the whole thing," Cole said. "Turned you into a terrorist. Said the ranchers were slaughtered trying to protect settlers." "But that's not what happened." "I know that," he said. "We know that. But they don't want the truth. They want a story that gives them reason to wipe the rest of your people out." She was silent. "Briggs isn't just a bounty man," he added. "He's a federal contractor now, working under orders. They gave him money, guns, and men to contain the threat. That threat is you." Eli looked between them, confused. "Why you?" Nantan exhaled. "Because I'm the last one who remembers the truth." Cole slid another paper across the table. This one was handwritten. Nantan read it slowly. It was a list. Dozens of names. Beside each, deported, killed, vanished. Eli whispered, "Are those?" Nantan nodded. "My clan." Cole leaned forward. "They're erasing your people, one town at a time. But it's not random, it's coordinated. Documents say it's preventive removal. They're calling it relocation. But it's execution. Quiet. Hidden." Nantan swallowed. Something inside her twisted. Grief, rage, guilt. "Why?" she asked. "Why now?" Cole's voice was low. "Because they found oil. On Apache land." The room fell silent. Eli's eyes widened. "Oil." Nantan stood slowly. Her pulse thundered in her ears. All this time, she'd thought they wanted revenge. Control. Fear. But it was greed. Cold. Simple. Bottomless. The death of her people had been nothing more than the price of a resource. She whispered, "They're killing us for fuel." Cole nodded. "And they won't stop. Not unless someone burns their story down." She looked at the paper again, then back at him. "I'm done running," she said. "Then let's make him bleed," Cole said. But that's when the window shattered. Gunfire exploded through the glass, bullets ripping into the wall inches from Eli's head. "Down!" Cole shouted. Nantan grabbed Eli and dove behind the table. Outside, bootsteps pounded on wood. "They found us," Cole barked. He grabbed his rifle, his limp arm dragging, but his good one steady. Nantan shoved Eli toward the back door. "Out! Run!" "No," he cried. She turned, fired once. A bounty man dropped outside the saloon. Cole pushed her toward the alley. "There's a train leaving tonight. Head north. Safe town past the ridge. I'll draw them off." "I'm not leaving you again," she snapped. He smiled grimly. "I'm not giving you a choice." He kissed her forehead, then shoved her out the door. She and Eli ran. Gunfire followed them. Screams. Smoke. They didn't look back. Not this time. They reached the train just as it began to pull out. Nantan leapt onto the last car, hauling Eli up beside her. The engine roared. Behind them, Dry Bluff burned. They sat in silence for a long time. Then Eli said, "They made you into the villain." Nantan stared out at the night. "No," she said. "They made me into the story. And now, it was hers to finish." The train chugged through the night, a slow, relentless rhythm against the endless dark. The low hiss of steam and the clanking of the tracks were the only sounds in the car, save for the occasional sob that Eli tried to stifle. Nantan sat with her back against the cold metal of the car, eyes fixed on the horizon. The dim light from the lanterns flickered in her mind like broken firelight. Dry Bluff burning, Cole smiled before he shoved her into the alley, the crash of glass. It felt like a memory of someone else. She thought about the man she'd left behind and the man she was becoming. Eli wasn't speaking. Not since they'd run. Not since they'd left the wreckage of Dry Bluff behind them. At first, Nantan had told herself the silence between them was just the exhaustion, the shock. But it wasn't just that. She could feel it, a wall forming between them. The weight of it crushed her chest. They reached a town called Coldwater a day later, a small place where the land stretched out in endless plains. The sun was setting, casting the whole place in a muted golden hue. For the first time in days, it felt like they could breathe. But as they stepped off the train, the people eyed them, curious but distant. They didn't stop to offer help, or even a smile. They didn't ask where they were from, or where they were going. Nantan felt like an outsider, like a ghost walking in their midst. Eli hadn't said a word for hours. She tried to get him to eat. "You need to eat," she urged, but he only pushed the plate away. He stared out the window at the town square, his face drawn tight. His eyes were shadowed, distant. "Eli," Nantan said softly, sitting beside him. "Talk to me." He flinched. His gaze shifted, but he didn't look at her. "What's the point?" Her chest tightened. "What do you mean?" He looked at her then, his eyes wide with frustration, pain, confusion. "We're running. From everything. And everyone. And for what? So we can just hide until they find us again." She swallowed hard. The guilt came like a punch, something that she couldn't explain, something she hadn't known she was carrying. "I'm doing this for us," she said, her voice hoarse. "For us." His voice cracked, like he was on the edge of breaking. "I don't know who you're doing this for anymore, Nantan. You left him. You left Cole. And now we're here. Running." She flinched at the name, the rawness of it cutting her deep. "I had no choice." Eli turned his back to her, staring out the window again, refusing to face her. "I don't care anymore." Hours later, Nantan lay awake in their small room. The shadows stretched long against the walls, and the wind outside howled like something alive. Eli had retreated into silence. His walls had gone up again, higher than before. Nantan's heart felt heavy, like something was breaking inside her that she couldn't fix. She stared up at the cracked ceiling. It had all happened so fast. Dry Bluff, the bounty hunters, the lies, Cole's sacrifice. She didn't know where she was anymore. She didn't know who she was supposed to be. The fire had burned her people, had taken everything. Now it was taking her, too. The woman she had been, the one who could face the world with her head held high, was slipping away like dust in the wind. In the morning, they packed their things in silence. Eli didn't look at her. He didn't speak. The weight of his anger pressed down on her shoulders like a boulder. When they stepped out of the room, the world felt too big, too cold. Coldwater was just like every other town. They would pass through, leave their mark, and vanish. No one would remember them, except for the ones who hunted them. Nantan wondered if that was how it would always be. They didn't stay in Coldwater long. They couldn't afford to. The bounty was closing in, and every step they took felt like a countdown to their next escape. As they moved through the small streets, Nantan spotted something. An old woman sitting outside a store, a patchwork blanket wrapped around her shoulders. Her eyes were rheumy, her face creased with age, but something in her gaze made Nantan stop. The woman's eyes locked onto hers, and in that moment, something passed between them, a shared understanding, unspoken but felt. The old woman's lips barely moved, but her words reached Nantan's ears like a whisper carried on the wind. "You're not alone." Nantan blinked, shaken, and when she looked again, the woman was gone. Just like that. She glanced at Eli, who was still walking ahead, lost in his thoughts. That night, after they made camp in the hills, Nantan sat by the fire, staring into the flames. Eli sat across from her, his back to her, hands wrapped around his knees. She wanted to speak, wanted to tell him everything. The truth of the world, the pain she felt, the emptiness that gnawed at her heart. But the words stuck in her throat. She knew what he needed, someone to help him carry this weight. But she couldn't even carry her own. The night passed in a haze, and the next morning, things didn't feel any different. The horizon was still endless. The path before them still dark. But the weight on Nantan's shoulders had grown heavier. The truth of everything, the betrayal, the hunt, the loss, was pulling her apart, piece by piece. And Eli, Eli wasn't just angry anymore. He was scared. Scared of what would happen if they kept running. Scared of what would happen if they stopped. By mid-afternoon, they reached a crossroads, a place where the road forked. To the left, a dirt trail that would lead them deeper into the mountains, away from the bounty hunters. To the right, a town where there would be people, safety, maybe even a chance to rest. But when Nanton looked at Eli, she saw something in his eyes that made her heart stop. It was the same look he had when he spoke of their survival. That quiet terror. The fear of what had happened, of what would come. "We need to keep moving," he said quietly, his voice distant, like he was already gone. And Nanton knew, deep down, that he wasn't talking about the road. Eli turned and walked away, his footsteps dragging in the dirt. The world felt even colder now. Nanton stayed still for a moment, her chest tight, her hands trembling at her sides. She felt like she was losing him. But the truth was, she had already lost herself. The morning after Eli had walked away, Nanton couldn't shake the cold feeling in her chest. The space between them had grown too vast, too dark. She watched him sit on a rock, staring out at the mountain range, lost in his thoughts. His silence had wrapped around him like a second skin, an impenetrable wall. She wasn't sure if he'd ever look at her the same way again. The betrayal of Dry Bluff, the chaos that followed, she could see it in his eyes. The anger had given way to something far more dangerous, indifference. She had failed him, but she couldn't afford to dwell on it, not if they were to survive, not if she had any hope of turning this all around. That morning, as they broke camp, Nanton found herself standing at the edge of the cliffs, staring at the valley below. The valley where everything she once knew had crumbled. Her people, her clan, the land that had once been theirs. The world felt too big now, too overwhelming. Each step forward felt like a battle between what was left of the woman she was and the woman she had to become. She felt small. Then, a voice from behind broke the silence. "You're thinking too hard." Eli's voice was soft, his tone barely above a whisper. He stood just behind her, a distant figure against the rising sun. His words hit her harder than they should have. He wasn't angry anymore. He was tired, worn thin. They both were. She turned to face him, but didn't know what to say. She had spent the night planning her next move, trying to figure out how to fix everything, how to make it right, make him whole again. But it wasn't just about her anymore. It wasn't just about surviving. It was about doing something. Something that could give them a chance to finally take back control. "We can't keep running," Nanton said, her voice hoarse from the strain. "I've been running for years." Eli didn't respond right away. He just nodded slowly, a look of quiet resignation in his eyes. After a moment, he said, "What if you stopped running? What if we stopped running?" The words stung, because they both knew what it meant. Stopping meant fighting, and that was the last thing she wanted to do. But deep down, it was the only thing left. As they made their way through the mountain passes, Nanton's mind shifted into overdrive. The plan she'd been holding on to, the one that kept her and Eli always moving forward, always ahead of their enemies, it wasn't enough. She needed something more. She needed a way to make the bounty hunters and the federal agents chase her, rather than the other way around. The answer had been right in front of her the entire time. That evening, after they'd found a secluded spot for camp, Nanton pulled out the map Cole had given her. She spread it out across the ground. The lines of the land stretched before her like a puzzle that needed solving. She studied the marked locations, the ones Cole had indicated, places of significance to her people, land where her ancestors had lived, hunted, fought. She focused on one point, a location deep in the mountains. Wadi Dusk. It was a sacred site, a hidden valley where her people had gone for centuries to bury their dead and perform ceremonies. It had been forgotten by everyone except those who had once called it home. The map gave her a shuddering realization. The land, the very land they were trying to erase, was the key. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It wasn't about running. It was about returning to that place and reclaiming it. Nanton looked up at Eli, who was sitting by the fire, sharpening a knife. "We go to Wadi Dusk," she said, her voice steady for the first time in days. "It's the only place that's still ours, and I'm not letting anyone take it." Eli glanced up, his brow furrowing. "Isn't that where Yes, she said. It's the heart of our people, and I'm going to make sure it stays that way. That night, they packed quickly, only taking the essentials. Nanton's mind raced as she plotted the route, skirting around towns where they might be recognized, taking the mountain paths less traveled. Wadi Dusk was a place of great significance, but it was also dangerous. Only those with knowledge of the land could navigate it without getting lost, and she was one of the few left who knew how to get there. But it wasn't just the danger from nature she had to worry about. It was the bounty hunters, the lawmen, the men who wanted her dead. They reached the foot of the mountains 2 days later. The air grew thinner, colder. The wind picked up, whipping their faces with the stinging bite of the high altitude. They paused at the base of a cliffside, overlooking a vast expanse of jagged rocks and dark valleys. The path to Wadi Dusk was treacherous, and the thought of leading Eli into the unknown made her hesitate for a moment. But Eli was no longer the boy who followed her without question. He was older now, more aware, and as much as she wanted to protect him from the dangers ahead, she knew she couldn't hold him back any longer. He stood beside her, staring into the mountains. "It's going to be hard, isn't it?" he asked quietly. "It always is," she replied. "But this time, we have something they don't." "What's that?" "A purpose." For the next 2 days, they pushed through the mountains, navigating the rocky terrain and avoiding any settlements. They slept under the stars, keeping their fires small and their movements quiet. The constant fear of being hunted, being found, gnawed at their thoughts. But Nanton's resolve was firm. Every step took them closer to the heart of their land, the place that could change everything. When they finally reached the valley, the sun was beginning to set. The air had a heaviness to it, like the land was holding its breath. The valley, nestled deep between 2 high ridges, stretched out before them like a sanctuary. The sound of running water from a nearby stream filled the air, and the scent of pine mixed with the earth beneath their feet. This was home. But it wasn't just home, it was a message. To those who had taken everything from her. To those who thought they could erase her people. "This is ours." They set to work immediately. Nanton didn't have much, just what she had scavenged along the way, but it was enough. As Eli helped gather firewood, she carved into the rocks, marking the entrance to the valley, leaving signs of her people's presence. She painted symbols on the boulders, etched words into the dirt. She wasn't just protecting the land, she was claiming it. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, Nanton stood tall, looking out over the land she would fight for. Eli came up beside her, standing in silence for a long while before speaking. "Do you think they'll come after us?" "They'll try," she said, her voice calm. "But this time, we're not running." And for the first time in what felt like forever, she felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. The fire crackled quietly in the center of the camp, casting long shadows across the valley. Nanton sat by the flames, her thoughts far away as she stared into the embers. They had spent days in the safety of Wadi Dusk, a brief moment of peace, but she knew it wouldn't last. She could feel the bounty hunters closing in, could sense the pressure building, the clock ticking. Eli had been quieter than usual these past few days, more distant. It was subtle, but it was there. His eyes no longer met hers in the way they once did, as though there was something behind them that he wasn't sharing. She wanted to reach out, to ask him what was wrong, but something held her back. Maybe it was the weight of the world on both of them, the constant fight for survival. Or maybe, just maybe, it was the unspoken tension that had been building ever since Dry Bluff, ever since they had fled. That night, when the sky was painted with the deep hues of twilight, Nanton woke to the sound of footsteps near the edge of the camp. She froze, her heart racing. Eli was standing by the edge of the rocks, looking down at the distant horizon. His posture was stiff, his shoulders hunched as if he were carrying the weight of the world on them. She slipped from her blanket, careful not to wake him, and quietly made her way over to him. He didn't turn as she approached, but she could see the tension in his back, in the way his hands curled into fists at his sides. She stopped just behind him, unsure of what to say. "Eli?" she asked, her voice tentative. "You okay?" He didn't answer immediately. The silence stretched between them, thick and uncomfortable. Finally, he spoke, his voice so low that she could barely hear him. You were right, he said. We can't keep running. Nantan blinked, confusion sweeping over her. What do you mean? Eli turned, his face illuminated by the dim glow of the firelight. But his eyes were distant, hollow, as though they had already left. He looked at her for a long moment before speaking again. I've been thinking about it. I don't think we can fight anymore. We can't stay here, and we can't keep running. So I've made a decision. Her chest tightened. What decision? Eli took a deep breath, his hands trembling slightly. I've made a deal with them. The words hit her like a punch. She recoiled, her heart thundering in her chest. What? I'm going to turn myself in, he said, his voice filled with something she couldn't quite place. I'll tell them where you are. I'll lead them away from here, so they'll stop looking for you. Her mind raced, her heart shattering into pieces. No, Eli, you can't. His face was set, determined. I have to. I can't keep doing this. I can't keep running. I never wanted this life, Nantan. I never wanted to be in this fight. But you don't understand. The longer we stay here, the more dangerous it gets. For both of us. No, Nantan said, her voice trembling now. This isn't the way. We're so close. We can fight. We can. You don't get it. Eli interrupted, stepping back from her. You never did. You've always been strong, Nantan. But I'm not. I can't keep pretending like I am. I can't keep pretending that I'm not afraid. I can't keep carrying this weight. Nantan's eyes burned with unshed tears. She stepped forward, her hand reaching for him. But he stepped back again, this time looking at her with something that cut through her. Regret, but also a kind of finality that left no room for argument. I can't do it anymore, Eli said quietly, shaking his head. This is the only way. It's the only way I can make it right. She reached out, her fingers grazing his arm. Eli, please. His gaze softened, just for a moment, and in that moment, it was like everything he had ever wanted to say was right there, unsaid. He pulled away from her touch, his face closing down once more. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm so sorry. Nantan stood there in the dark, watching him walk away. She felt numb, the tears she hadn't allowed herself to shed earlier now rushing to the surface, blurring her vision. She wanted to run after him, to stop him, to beg him to stay, but deep down, she knew it wouldn't change anything. He had made up his mind. She collapsed to her knees in the dirt, her heart splintering. She hadn't just lost her family, her land, her future. Now she was losing him too. The next morning, she woke to an empty camp. Eli was gone. The world felt silent without him. The mountains felt colder. Nantan sat at the edge of the fire, staring into the ashes, a hollow pit growing inside her. She had no time to mourn. Not yet. By the time the bounty hunters arrived, Eli was gone. She didn't know what he had told them, what lies he had fed them to lead them away from Wadi Dusk. All she knew was that he was gone, and she was left to face the consequences of his sacrifice. The bounty hunters didn't waste any time. They were brutal, ruthless, as they moved through the valley, searching for any sign of her. Nantan barely managed to evade them, slipping between rocks and caves, using every ounce of skill she had learned over the years. But the truth was undeniable. She was alone. And worse, she had no one to trust. That night, after escaping their pursuit once more, Nantan sat by a fire on a cliffside, staring into the flames. She thought of Eli, of how he had looked at her one last time, his eyes filled with the weight of a decision he had made for them both. The guilt ate at her. She had failed him. She had been too proud, too stubborn to see what he needed, what he couldn't say. And now he was gone. But there was something else, too. Something she couldn't explain. A small flicker of something deeper, something she had buried under layers of survival and pain. Eli had loved her enough to let her go. The realization hit her like a wave, and she understood, in that moment, the true depth of his sacrifice. He hadn't just given up his life. He had given her the chance to keep fighting, to survive. But it didn't make the pain any easier. The loss wasn't something that could be erased, not with any amount of time or strength. It was the kind of loss that would haunt her for the rest of her life. Nantan stood up slowly, wiping away the last of her tears. There was no going back now. The world had already taken too much from her. But she would not let it take everything. With one last look at the campfire, she turned away, her steps resolute. She didn't know where she was going next, but she knew this. Eli's sacrifice would not be in vain. She would fight. The silence that followed Eli's departure was suffocating, and Nantan could feel every second of it pressed down on her chest like a vice. She couldn't sleep. She couldn't think. All she could do was move forward, one foot in front of the other, because staying still would only let the memories overwhelm her, drown her in the darkness of what she had lost. She had no time for mourning. The bounty hunters were still out there, relentless, closing in. The land had become a prison. The mountains, once her refuge, now felt like a trap. For 3 days, Nantan tracked the bounty hunters from a distance, hiding in the rocks, always staying one step ahead. Every time she thought she had outrun them, they found a new way to close the gap. It was like they knew her every move before she made it. The tension was unbearable. Each night, when the fire burned low and the stars were her only company, Nantan rehearsed the same plan in her mind, always tweaking it, always perfecting it. She had been a hunter once, tracking prey through the mountains, using the land to her advantage. But now, there was no prey. There was only the enemy, and the weight of everything that had led to this moment. The next day, she arrived at a narrow pass, a natural choke point she had chosen as her battleground. The only way in or out was through a rock-strewn corridor, a trap that would force the bounty hunters to come at her one by one, in a line. She would have the high ground, and she knew the terrain better than anyone. She could make them bleed, slow them down. But it would be a fight to the death. There would be no escape, no second chances. She would do what she had to do, because there was no other choice. The sun began to set, casting long shadows over the valley below. Nantan checked her weapons one last time, the feel of the cold steel a reminder of the violence that was coming. Her rifle was clean, the cartridges in her pouch full and ready. She adjusted her knife, making sure it was securely fastened to her side. Every movement was precise, practiced. Her hands moved without hesitation, as if they were not her own. As the sun dipped below the horizon, she took a long breath, steadying herself. The weight of her decisions, of everything that had led to this moment, bore down on her. But there was no turning back now. She climbed to a high ledge, scanning the valley. The trees below were beginning to stir in the wind, the dark silhouettes of the mountains looming like giants. In the distance, she saw them, 4 men, walking in a line. The bounty hunters. They were close. Too close. Nantan's pulse quickened. She had prepared for this. She had planned for it. She had anticipated every move, every reaction. But she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. There was a tension in the air, a kind of electric hum, and her instincts told her to wait, to hold her fire. The men came closer, walking in formation. There was no doubt they were after her. She had been leaving a trail behind her for days, and they were closing in. But something in the way they moved told her they weren't just looking for her. They were looking for something else, someone else. A sickening thought flickered through her mind. Eli. It wasn't just the bounty hunters. It was the lawmen. And someone else, someone who had been hunting her from the shadows, was now pulling the strings. Her heart skipped a beat. This wasn't just about survival anymore. She had no time. She had to act fast. Nantan crouched down, keeping her movements as silent as possible. She watched the bounty hunters approach the choke point. It was too late to change the plan now. The trap was set. But as they neared the pass, she noticed something that made her stomach churn, a flicker of movement to her left. A figure was emerging from the trees. No. Her breath caught in her throat as she recognized the figure, Cole. The betrayal hit her like a slap to the face. He had been the one to warn her, the one to give her the map to Wadi Dusk. He had promised her safety, and now here he was, leading the very men who had been hunting her. Her mind raced, trying to piece it together. Had he been working with them all along? Had he sold her out? Her thoughts collided in a whirlwind of anger and confusion. She wanted to scream, to shout, but she couldn't. She couldn't reveal herself. Not yet. Cole exchanged a few words with the bounty hunters, then gestured toward the narrow pass. The hunters nodded, their faces hard with purpose. She knew then that they weren't just here for the reward. They were here to take her back, alive or dead. They wouldn't stop until she was in their hands. Her pulse hammered in her ears. Cole had betrayed her. Her hand tightened around the rifle, her knuckles white. The rage was suffocating, a burning fire in her chest. But she didn't have time for that now. There was no room for emotion, Not when they were this close. The moment was slipping away, and if she didn't act now, they would be upon her. Nanton rose to her feet, steadying herself. The rifle felt heavy in her hands, the weight of it more than just the weapon. It was the weight of her survival, of everything she had fought for. She adjusted her position, ensuring she had a clear line of sight on the pass. One shot, just one shot, was all she needed. The bounty hunters were almost to the narrow pass. Cole stood just behind them, still watching the path with a keen eye, his face twisted in a look of cold determination. Nanton's finger tightened on the trigger. The wind howled through the pass, the sound a harsh reminder of the stakes. One shot. She took a deep breath, focusing her mind. There was no turning back. There was no hesitation. As the first bounty hunter stepped into the trap, Nanton fired. The shot rang out across the valley, deafening in the stillness of the mountains. The first man dropped, a clean shot to the chest. Chaos erupted immediately. The other men scattered, diving for cover. Cole's face twisted in shock, but he didn't move. He stood there, frozen, like a traitor waiting for the consequences. Nanton didn't give them time to regroup. She fired again, taking out another man. But as the third man dove behind a rock, her heart sank. Eli was right there. She had hoped, prayed, that she had been wrong. But Eli was with them, standing at the back of the group, his hands raised as if trying to shield himself from the chaos she was creating. Her heart clenched. The betrayal was complete. The man she had loved, had trusted, was no longer the ally she thought him to be. But it was too late to change anything now. Nanton fired again. The third man fell. But in the back of her mind, the image of Eli's face stayed with her, burning into her consciousness. The final confrontation had begun, and the countdown had reached its last, desperate seconds. The sound of gunfire echoed through the valley, the crack of each shot reverberating off the jagged cliffs like a thunderclap. Nanton's breath was ragged, but her hands remained steady, her rifle trained on the last remaining bounty hunter as he darted for cover. She didn't need to look at Eli. She knew he was there, just beyond the chaos, the one constant she hadn't anticipated. His face, his presence, both a bitter reminder of the betrayal that had led them here. Her pulse thudded in her ears, the weight of her decisions crashing down on her in an overwhelming wave. But she couldn't stop. Not now. Not when it was all on the line. The life she had fought for, the memories of everything she had lost, everything hung in the balance of these next few moments. Eli was still standing in the distance, watching, as if frozen. She could feel his gaze on her, his eyes locked onto hers through the smoke and dust. Every part of her wanted to run to him, to understand what had happened, to scream at him, to ask him how it had come to this. But the moment wasn't hers to control anymore. There was only the fight, only the need to survive. The last of the bounty hunters was moving to her left, ducking behind a boulder for cover, but she knew he couldn't stay hidden for long. Her rifle was aimed, steady, focused. One more shot, one more opportunity to take control of the chaos around her. Her breath hitched as she pulled the trigger. The man staggered back, a grunt escaping his lips as the bullet struck him. He fell, his body hitting the ground with a sickening thud. Silence descended on the battlefield, except for the soft shuffle of footsteps. Nanton's eyes flickered to the right. Eli was moving forward, his hands raised, his face a mask of conflicting emotions, guilt, shame, anger. It didn't matter. It couldn't. The moment he stepped into view, Nanton's chest tightened, her hand shaking as she lowered her rifle. She had been ready to kill. She had been ready to end it all, and now, here he was, standing in front of her, no longer the man she had once known. The man who had walked away. The man who had betrayed her. Eli. Her voice cracked, barely audible over the wind. The words sounded foreign in her mouth, as if it didn't belong there anymore. He stopped a few feet away, his face filled with something she couldn't place. Desperation. Regret. The flicker of hope, the briefest glimpse of the man she had once trusted. He didn't speak at first, his hands dropping to his sides as he took a tentative step closer. "I had no choice," he said, his voice hoarse, the words like daggers. "I was trying to protect you. I thought if I turned myself in, if I made them believe I was on their side, you'd have a chance to escape. I didn't know what else to do. I thought it would work. Nanton's breath hitched again. She wanted to scream, to tell him how wrong he was. How could he think that? How could he do this to her, to them? Everything they had fought for, everything they had shared, reduced to a lie. But her words faltered in her throat, trapped by the heaviness of her grief and rage. You thought. Her voice broke, raw and trembling. You thought it would work? You thought I would just walk away from this, from you, without a fight? Without asking why? Why didn't you come back? Why didn't you trust me? The tears were inevitable now. They burned hot against her skin as they welled up in her eyes, but she couldn't look away from him. He took a cautious step toward her, reaching out. I never wanted to hurt you. I never wanted to make you think that. You did hurt me. Nanton cut him off, her voice trembling but firm. You left me. You chose them over me, over us. I'm still standing here, Eli, still fighting for us, for the people we used to be. And you're standing here telling me you thought it would work? You thought I'd be okay with that. He flinched, his face pale, as if her words had struck him deeper than anything the world had thrown at him. But still, he reached for her. His hand hovered between them, uncertain, as if trying to bridge the gap that had grown between them. Nantan recoiled, her eyes narrowing as she stepped back. Don't touch me. Not now. I'm sorry, he whispered, the words strangled, his voice breaking. I'm sorry for everything. The silence that followed felt deafening. Nanton's heart pounded in her chest, each beat an echo of the pain and betrayal that had torn through her. She had loved him. She had trusted him, and he had broken that trust. But in this moment, as they stood there, facing the ruins of everything they had once been, there was one truth that couldn't be denied. She couldn't go on without him, but she also couldn't let him destroy everything she had built in the ashes of their love. Eli stepped back, his hands falling to his sides, his eyes downcast, defeated. It was as if he had finally realized the weight of what he had done, realized that the love they had shared was no longer enough to fix the damage. Nanton's gaze hardened as she took a step forward, her voice quiet but cutting. You made your choice, Eli, and now you'll have to live with it. I can't do this anymore. I can't keep forgiving you for things that can't be undone. He looked up at her, the pain in his eyes visible, but she wasn't finished. You wanted to protect me? You wanted to save me? You've done more damage than you could ever understand. You've taken my trust, my safety, my future, and turned it into nothing. Eli swallowed, his eyes glistening with regret. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. She shook her head slowly, her heart breaking all over again. I don't know who you are anymore, Eli, and I don't think I ever will. The wind howled through the valley, but the storm between them had passed. There was nothing left to say. No more anger, no more accusations. Just the stark, painful truth. She turned her back to him, the weight of her decision settling in her bones. Nanton didn't look back. She couldn't. She would keep moving forward, because that's what she had always done. There was no place for looking back, no place for lingering in the past. The world hadn't stopped for her grief. It had only demanded more of her. Her eyes scanned the horizon, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she felt something other than pain. She felt determination. Behind her, Eli stood motionless, watching as she walked away. His body was still, his heart heavy with the truth of what he had lost. He had made his choice, and now he would live with it. The world had moved on, and so had she. Nanton didn't know what the future would hold. All she knew was that she had reached the end of one chapter, and whether she was ready or not, the next one was waiting, and she would face it alone or not. Nantan rode through the night, the steady rhythm of her horse's hooves against the earth grounding her as the cool desert air whipped past. The stars above were a blanket of silver, indifferent to the weight of what she had left behind. The mountains loomed in the distance, their jagged edges cutting through the horizon like ancient, forgotten sentinels. The land was empty, but the silence felt like a loud echo of everything that had come before. She had made her choice. The path ahead was unclear, but one thing was certain. She would no longer allow herself to be bound by the past. The betrayal, the loss, the heartbreak, they had all carved deep scars into her soul, but scars were meant to heal, not to destroy. And though the pain was still raw, She could feel something shifting within her. The sharp edges were dulling, the weight less oppressive. The days that followed blurred together, a blur of long hours in the saddle, solitary camps beneath the stars, and the constant hum of thought that never quite stopped. Nanton didn't look back. Every time she thought of Eli, of their lost love and the man who had turned into a stranger, a part of her wanted to feel anger. But it was different now. The anger had burned itself out, leaving nothing but a quiet sadness. In a way, that sadness was a gift. It gave her clarity. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, she found herself at the edge of a canyon, a place she had once shared with Eli, where the sky had looked as if it might swallow the world whole. She dismounted and sat down on the jagged rocks, her fingers tracing the familiar lines of the canyon wall. The memories were sharp, but they didn't hurt like they once had. They just were part of her. She closed her eyes, feeling the weight of everything that had changed, everything she had lost, and everything she had gained. She had been so focused on survival, on the fight to stay alive, that she hadn't given herself permission to grieve. Now, in the quiet of the evening, she allowed herself to mourn the things she had left behind. But with that mourning came something else, something unexpected. Freedom. It was a strange word to think, after everything she had endured. But it was there, waiting for her. She was no longer shackled by her past, by the lies and the betrayals. She could choose. She could live. Nanton didn't know what the future held. The horizon was wide, the world vast, and filled with uncertainty. But she could feel it in her bones, the stirrings of something new. The path might not be clear, but it was hers to walk. She rode on, day after day, the landscape changing around her, the world constantly shifting. The wind spoke to her in whispers, the earth beneath her hooves offering a steady rhythm. She found a new purpose, something beyond survival, something that made her feel alive again. The land was hers, just as much as it had ever been, and she had finally learned to stop running from it. But every so often, in the stillness of the night, when the fire was low and the stars were watching from above, she would think of him. And in those moments, she would wonder, what if? What if things had been different? What if he hadn't left her? What if she had trusted him? The answers never came. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Nantan continued, moving forward, carving her own path. She didn't need to find answers. She had found peace. But the world, in all its unpredictable glory, still had a way of reminding her that life was full of twists and turns. That no matter how much she thought she understood it, there was always more to learn. There was always more to discover. One day, as she passed through a small town, the air thick with dust and the scent of horses and old leather, she heard whispers, soft, hushed words carried by the wind. It was news of Eli. He had been arrested, captured by the very lawman he had tried to deceive. His face was plastered on every wanted poster, his name spoken in fear and disgust. The bounty had been doubled, his reputation now tarnished beyond repair. But none of it mattered to her anymore. The stories she had once shared with him, the plans they had made, were nothing more than ghosts of a past that was no longer hers to carry. The world had moved on. She had moved on. And in that moment, Nanton realized the only thing that truly mattered was that she was still standing. The future was still open, waiting to be shaped by her hands. She took one last look at the horizon, where the sun was dipping low behind the mountains, casting everything in a golden light. She didn't know where she was headed next, or what awaited her at the end of the road. But she did know one thing. She was free, and that was enough. As the sun sank lower, casting the valley in shadow, the wind picked up, carrying with it the faintest whisper, the echoes of the past. But Nanton didn't listen. She had heard them all before. And now, she was ready for whatever came next.